In 1912, humanity believed it had created the unsinkable, but the ocean had other plans.
He said we shouldn't board.
The collision will be at 11:40 p.m. I've seen this ending many times.
A silenced testimony, a name erased from the records, a secret history tried to hide.
This shouldn't exist.
What if the Titanic wasn't just a shipwreck? What if it was the greatest time travel ever experienced by a man lost between eras?
I can't stop it. I'm trapped in time.
The passenger who saw the Titanic sink. The night the sea chose. The Titanic departed from Southampton on April 10, 1912, carrying dreams, riches, and hopes. It was the pinnacle of modernity. The world's headlines called it unsinkable, and every passenger carried in their eyes the certainty of being aboard a miracle of engineering. But among the guests, there was a different man. Testimonies speak of a solitary passenger with clothes that didn't seem of the era, who avoided gatherings and watched the sea with an expression of someone who already knew too much. Some said he spoke of an inevitable disaster. Others reported that his words sounded like delirium. But most disturbingly, he cited the exact time the ship would collide with the iceberg. At 11:40, he said, "Everything will change." This man seemed to carry something beyond fear. He spoke in terms no one understood. Timelines, ruptures, and anomalies. These are words that made absolutely no sense for people living in 1912. To some, he was just a lunatic. But for those who were close, there was a real weight to his voice. Days later, when the tragedy struck at the exact predicted time, many remembered that mysterious passenger. However, his name never appeared on the official manifests. It was as if he had boarded without a record, like a phantom presence on the voyage. The account of this mysterious man vanished from official records, but fragments survived. A young survivor wrote in her diary, "A gentleman told me not to board. He said the future was already written." I laughed. Today, his words haunt me. Another document, found in a salvaged suitcase, mentioned the passenger who spoke of future newspapers. But how could someone describe newspaper headlines that hadn't been printed yet? Decades later, researchers matched descriptions with old photographs and found something terrifying. Images of an identical man captured in different eras of the 20th century, always the same, with no signs of aging. It was the same face, the same eyes, the same expression filled with melancholy. A coincidence? Or someone truly trapped in an endless journey through time? Divers who explored the wreckage in 1985 reported finding impossible objects. One of them spoke of a watch that looked digital, something that would only be invented 60 years later. Officially, none of this was confirmed, but the doubt lingers. Could it be that among the wreckage of the Titanic lies the most concrete proof of a time travel journey ever recorded? The presence of that passenger on the Titanic raises an inevitable question. If he truly came from the future, why did he do nothing to change its fate? Some believe that certain events are fixed points in the timeline, immutable points that no force can alter. The sinking of the Titanic would be one of these unbreakable landmarks. Perhaps his mission wasn't to save, but to ensure the tragedy occurred exactly as it was meant to, like a pillar of history that could not be removed. This idea transforms him into something more than a simple traveler. He would be an invisible guardian, a prisoner at time condemned to watch, powerless, the sorrows of humanity. But if this hypothesis seems frightening, even more disturbing is the silence that followed. The official records barely mention him, as if he had been erased from history. There are no passenger lists, no preserved official testimonies, only scattered echoes in diaries, letters, and forgotten memories. This is where the mystery takes on a new dimension. If his existence was suppressed, it didn't happen by chance. Perhaps powerful forces, whether to protect economic interests or to avoid social chaos, decided this story should never come to light. But the more they tried to hide it, the more the shadows spread. And it is precisely from this point that the questions grow and the fragments of truth begin to emerge. In the following accounts, we will see how forgotten pieces of testimony, hushed-up conspiracies, and even impossible objects kept the myth of the Time Man alive. The official silence didn't erase history, it only made it more irresistible. Right after the shipwreck, British and American authorities conducted official investigations. Hundreds of pages of depositions were gathered, but some details simply vanished. Testimonies mentioning a strange passenger who spoke of the future were dismissed, labeled as hallucinations or the confusion of survivors in shock. This systematic erasure raised suspicions. Why were so many similar accounts ignored? Some historians believe financial interests were at stake. Admitting a man predicted the tragedy could have triggered million-dollar lawsuits against the White Star Line. After all, if someone knew, why didn't they stop it? The silence was convenient because it transformed everything into an unavoidable accident instead of a foretold catastrophe. The official version needed to be simple, rational, and acceptable. But other researchers propose even bolder theories. If that man was truly a time traveler, authorities might have hidden the truth to avoid panic. In 1912, revealing that the future could invade the present would have been an affront not only to science, but also to faith and the social order. Humanity wasn't ready to accept that time could be manipulated, so his existence was erased from the reports, as if he had never been there. However, the more they tried to silence the story, the more the rumors grew. The Time Man became a ghost in the shadows of history, resurfacing whenever someone dared to revisit the forgotten archives of the Titanic. Among the fragments recovered after the tragedy, one of the most disturbing came to light decades later. The diary of a young woman just 17 years old who boarded the Titanic full of dreams. In its water-stained pages was a seemingly mundane account, but one that became one of the greatest enigmas of the shipwreck. She described meeting a strange man with a heavy gaze and incomprehensible words who warned her not to continue the journey. She wrote, "He spoke of the future, of things I couldn't understand. He said he already knew me from another life." What's most unsettling is that this man supposedly told her something impossible. He described how she would live to old age, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. The young woman, not understanding, dismissed it all as delirium. But she survived the shipwreck and truly lived exactly as he had predicted, passing away decades later as an old woman. How could anyone have known that with such precision? Was it merely a coincidence? Or proof that this passenger had already traveled through time and seen her in different eras? Modern researchers consider this diary one of the strongest pieces of evidence to support the theory of time travel. But strangely, the original disappeared from the official archives. Only copies made by family members survived. The fate of the original document remains a mystery. Had it been lost to the passage of time? Or did someone make it disappear intentionally so that no concrete proof would remain? This diary is like a voice that resists being erased. The innocence of the young woman's words carries a weight that not even she could comprehend. And at the same time, it reveals what seems to be a pattern throughout the Titanic's narrative. Whenever evidence emerges linking the disaster to time travel, that evidence ends up disappearing into the shadows. In 1985, when Robert Ballard's expedition revealed the wreckage of the Titanic to the world, the silence of the depths was broken. Among twisted steel plates and furniture destroyed by time, some divers reported, in particular, a disturbing find, an object that could not have existed in 1912. Described as something similar to a small digital watch, it was reportedly seen among the wreckage on the deck, an anachronistic artifact displaced from its time as if it had fallen from another century. Officially, nothing was mentioned in the reports, but years later, one of the divers revealed in an anonymous interview, "I saw something that shouldn't have been there. It was collected and never shown again. It was small, metallic, and shown in a strange way." These words fueled a firestorm of theories. Could this be the object of the mysterious passenger? A piece brought from another time, lost in the shipwreck and later hidden? If such an artifact really existed, it would be the definitive proof that the man was not just a forgotten survivor, but a real time traveler. A material detail, impossible to be explained by superstition or collective imagination. And this is precisely the point that makes the story so unsettling. Why would they hide something like that? What is there to fear and reveal in it? Since then, mystery hunters claimed that other impossible objects may still be resting at the bottom of the Atlantic. Watches, metallic fragments, alloys unknown in 1912. But if they are ever found and revealed, they would not only rewrite the history of the Titanic, they would change everything we understand about time. Decades after the sinking, independent researchers began to review photographic records from different eras, searching for the faces of survivors or visual oddities connected to the Titanic. What they found was something that seems to defy all logical explanation. The same man appeared in photos taken in the 1940s, 1960s, and even the 1990s. Always the same features, the same deep-set eyes, and the same melancholic expression. He seemed frozen in time, as if he hadn't aged a single day since 1912. Photographers and image analysis experts confirmed the records were authentic. There was no evidence of tampering. This turned the photos into a theoretical bombshell. Could this be the mysterious passenger? And if so, how could he be alive and look identical at different points in history? Some suggested genetic explanations, like family lookalikes, but the resemblance was so exact, it was impossible to ignore the more disturbing hypothesis. The man was trapped in an endless cycle of time travel. The theory gained even more strength in 1997 when one of these images showed an identical man among the guests at the premiere of the movie Titanic in London. There, amidst the crowd, the same face emerged, as if silently watching how his own story was being told on the big screen. Witnesses reported he didn't speak to anyone. He just stood there, motionless, with a distant look in his eyes. This repeated presence over the decades fuels the idea that the passenger never returned to his own time. Perhaps condemned, perhaps imprisoned, he wanders the timeline like an eternal spectator, reappearing at historically significant moments, always with the same expression of someone who carries the burden of knowing the end before the beginning. If there really was a time traveler on the Titanic, the biggest question isn't how he got there, but why he did nothing to prevent the tragedy. This question haunts researchers and enthusiasts to this day. The ship was carrying over 2,000 people. If he knew of its cruel fate, wouldn't it have made sense to try and save as many lives as possible? That's the contradiction that turns the mystery into a paradox. Scientists who study temporal theories speak of fixed points in history. These are moments that can't be altered without causing an irreparable rupture. The sinking of the Titanic would be one of those points. Any attempt to prevent the disaster could rewrite the entire course of the 20th century. Perhaps avoiding the tragedy would have delayed advances in maritime safety, changed the course of the First World War, or even erased events that shape the world we live in today. History had to happen exactly as it did. Another possibility is even crueler. The traveler tried to change events but failed. He tried to warn, he tried to alert, but no one believed him. Thus, his words echoed only as delirium. And at the crucial moment, he was forced to watch the inevitable, powerless before a destiny that could not be rewritten. This vision would transform him not into a villain, but a victim of the paradox itself. This dilemma, knowing the future and being unable to change it, is the true burden of time travel. More than technology, more than science, it's an unbearable psychological burden. The man who knew too much was not a savior, but a prisoner. And this prison wasn't made of iron, but out seconds, minutes, and hours that repeated, never allowing the outcome to be different. The Titanic sailed in a deeply religious world. For many of the passengers, life was guided by faith, prayers, and destiny. In this setting, the mysterious man was not just a stranger. To some, he seemed like a prophet. Witnesses claimed his words resembled apocalyptic sermons. He spoke of imminent destruction, an inevitable end, and used phrases that sounded like biblical warnings. In an era when every sign was interpreted as a divine message, some began to see him as an envoy from God. On the other hand, for other passengers and crew, his words were heresy. He didn't speak like a common preacher. He didn't quote psalms or repeat verses. Instead, he described events with almost technical detail, as if he possessed forbidden knowledge. To these people, he was not a prophet, but a heretic who challenged the established order. The idea that a man could know the future without being inspired by God seemed an intolerable blasphemy. This duality made his figure even more ambiguous. For some, he was a sign of hope, someone who had come to warn, just as the ancient prophets warned Israel of imminent disasters. For others, he was a malevolent omen, a dark presence carrying the weight of a curse. The clash between faith and science, always latent, found its personification in that man. And perhaps it was this same spiritual aura that helped keep the mystery alive. Because even decades later, survivors' accounts described him as the man who spoke in the name of destiny. The line between prophet and time traveler was never so thin. And to this day, we don't know if it was faith trying to interpret the impossible or the impossible trying to hide behind faith. For modern science, the Titanic has become more than just a shipwreck. It's a laboratory of paradoxes. Theoretical physicists and time scientists look at the accounts of the mysterious passenger and find in him a perfect example of a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of reality. The idea of someone who knew the future but could not change it fits into the concept of fixed timelines discussed in cosmology. In that sense, the Titanic was not only a maritime tragedy, but also a possible experiment of time and action. Some scientists argue that if time travel did indeed occur, it may have been the result of an error, a miscalculation, or a technological accident that launched humanity into an era that did not belong to it. He wouldn't have been on the Titanic by choice, but by mistake. Condemned to observe, unable to interact beyond ignored warnings, he became the human reflection of a poorly understood quantum phenomenon. Other theorists go even further. They suggest that the Titanic may have been the site of an intentional test. If someone from the future wanted to test the possibility of time travel, what better place than at an event that would become immutable and famous? The shipwreck is such a well-established historical landmark that its repetition in any timeline would be inevitable. A perfect point for study, because even with intervention, tragedy would likely still occur in some way. Science, however, can't prove anything. There is a lack of concrete evidence. All that remains are scattered accounts and bold theories. But in theoretical physics laboratories, the name Titanic appears in academic articles as an example of a fixed point, and that's enough to fuel the flame of doubt. Ultimately, if even the most skeptical scientists use the ship as a metaphor for the mysteries of time, perhaps there is more truth to this enigma than official history admits. In 1997, James Cameron brought to the cinema the largest superproduction ever made about the Titanic. Millions of people were moved by the story of Jack and Rose. But behind the fiction, there were curious details that caught the attention of those who study the mystery. Some dialogues and scenes from the film seemed to echo forgotten fragments from the diaries and letters of survivors, as if Cameron had somehow unconsciously captured echoes of something greater. During filming, the director himself stated in interviews that he felt the presence of the Titanic's dead watching over every take. For some, it was just a poetic way of describing the intensity of the work. For others, it was a clue that the myth of the mysterious passenger continued to manifest, even influencing the cinematic recreation of the tragedy. Could it be a coincidence that the film brought up dialogues never officially confirmed, but that were reminiscent of lost reports? The theory gained even more strength when, in photos from the film's premiere in London, a man identical to the traveler described by survivors appeared in the crowd. The same serious countenance, the same heavy expression. If it were true, it would mean that he watched his own story retold on the screen, in silence, as a spectator of eternity. Thus, the cinema not only revived the tragedy, it also rekindled the myth. The film became more than entertainment. It was a bridge between the collective memory and the never-explained mystery. Art, as it so often does, served as a mirror to the invisible, keeping alive the legend that the Titanic wasn't just a shipwreck, but the stage for a secret about time. Among the more than 700 survivors of the Titanic, some reported experiences that never made it into the official records. A third-class woman recounted that even before the collision, a man offered her a spot in a lifeboat. She refused, thinking it an overreaction, but survived by chance. Decades later, in an interview, she said, "He seemed to know that I would live. He looked at me as if he had already seen my future." That sentence echoes to this day as one of the most disturbing testimonies of the tragedy. A sailor reported hearing this same passenger murmur incomprehensible words moments before the collision. "The lines can't cross. They always return to the fixed point." No one understood what that meant, but the oral record survived in stories passed down from generation to generation. It was a strange technical language, completely out of place for the era, and yet it carried a terrifying certainty. Another account tells of a young woman who was convinced not to dine in the Grand Hall on the night of the impact. The man reportedly said that it wasn't worth celebrating a future that wouldn't exist. She survived, and later described her strange advisor as someone who seemed to have already seen the tragedy repeat itself time and again. This testimony was filed away, but it resurfaced in independent research in the 1970s. These voices, almost always discredited, form a mosaic of unsettling memories. They aren't scientific proof, but fragments of memories that point to the same figure, the man who knew too much. And while each isolated testimony can be dismissed as fabrication, all of them together create a picture that's impossible to ignore. It was as if the traveler had left subtle marks on several lives, not to save, but to be remembered. More than a century after the sinking, unsettling reports continue to emerge from different parts of the world. Ordinary people claim to have seen a solitary man in strange clothes with a lost gaze and a melancholic expression wandering the streets of major cities. Always the same face, described with precision in the old testimonies from the Titanic. These modern encounters have no official confirmation, but they multiply in forums, articles, and even independent documentaries. In New York, in the 1980s, a woman swore she saw this man standing in front of the Titanic memorial, staring intently at the names engraved on the stone. In London, in 2005, tourists said they had photographed someone identical to the mysterious passenger, walking alone near the Thames. In Paris, in 2019, a similar report circulated on social media. The same countenance, the same silent presence. For skeptics, they're just coincidences or theories fabricated by the collective imagination. But the disturbing detail is that these appearances always happen on dates or in places with strong historical significance, as if the traveler were condemned to revisit not only the Titanic, but also other crucial moments in human memory. A living ghost crossing through decades without ever settling in one place. The question remains, if he is still among us, why does he remain silent? Perhaps because his role was never to reveal the secret, but to carry the burden of knowing it alone. And so the myth of the mysterious passenger is no longer just a story from 1912, but becomes an enigma that haunts the modern era, as if time had never healed its wounds. Of all the theories surrounding the mysterious man from the Titanic, the darkest is that he wasn't just a lost traveler, but a prisoner condemned by time itself. He didn't travel by choice, but by a curse. Trapped in a sequence of historical tragedies, he was condemned to witness humanity's pain without ever being able to intervene. An invisible guardian, walking between the ages, always in the shadow of the greatest disasters. This vision transforms him into an almost mythical figure, no longer just a nameless passenger, but an eternal spectator, forced to silently carry the weight of knowing the end before the beginning. With every tragedy, he appears, trying to alert, trying to warn, but his words always fall on deaf ears. because destiny is immutable and he is just the ignored messenger. Some believe this is the ultimate punishment, to see the suffering without ever having the power to stop it. The curse of one who defied the rules of time and now pays the price of eternity. Perhaps that's why his expression, described in all the accounts, is always the same. Eyes that have seen too much, a heavy countenance of someone who carries centuries within him. Whether myth, legend, or hidden truth, this theory confronts us with a terrible question. What if every great tragedy in history was accompanied by this silent guardian? If it's real, the Titanic wasn't just the scene of a shipwreck, but another chapter in the long and dark journey of a man who will never find rest because his prison has no walls, it has centuries.